All right, let's just jump right in. Welcome to the Explainer. Now, we've all heard the story of Dr. John Snow and the Broad Street pump, right? It's classic epidemiology. But what if we didn't just read about his findings? What if we could actually rebuild his entire world digitally, drop in a bunch of virtual Londoners, and literally rerun the 1854 cholera disaster ourselves? Well, today, we're diving into a modern AI-generated simulator that lets us do exactly that. So here's the big question we're looking at today. What if we could rewind history and just change a single variable? I mean, imagine taking one of the most consequential medical investigations ever and turning it into this dynamic, computational sandbox. As you'll see, we're going to use this modern simulator like a digital detective tool. We can tweak the past and watch the ripple effects play out in real time. But first, let's set the stage a bit.
Section 1. The Broad Street Mystery. Golden Square, London, 1854.
Okay, to really ground ourselves before we boot up the simulation, we have to look at the historical baseline of this spatial epidemic. And 616, that is the heavy, grim reality we're dealing with here. In just a 6-week period starting on August 19th, there were 616 recorded fatal attacks of cholera in this one specific neighborhood. It was a completely localized tragedy, but the proportions were staggering, and people were absolutely desperate for answers.
To really grasp the sheer intensity of this, you have to consider the daily toll. This outbreak, it didn't just slowly simmer, exploded. The deaths actually peaked at an astonishing 143 fatal attacks on a single day. That was September 1st, which was right before John Snow really started piecing the puzzle together and stepped in with his legendary intervention.
Moving on to Section 2, Simulating a Spatial Epidemic.
So, to actually bring this historical data back to life, a company called DBbun LLC built what's known as an agent-based model, and they powered it using the Claude Sonnet 4.6 model. Instead of just looking at top-level math, the system actually generates 2,000 virtual residents. These are our agents. And here's the cool part. These agents aren't all identical robots. They make heterogeneous choices. They decide which of the 7 local water pumps to use based on a distance preference weight of 0.6. So some folks will just walk to the closest pump, while others might trek a bit further for water they prefer. And it's exactly those individual, human-like choices that drive the spatial transmission of the disease in our simulation.
To make this virtual slice of London as accurate as possible, the AI extracted precise parameters straight from Dr. Snow's original paper. Our simulator grid holds a population of 2,000 people, and there are 7 street pumps available. Now, crucially, the model assigns a 73% preference for the Broad Street pump's water among the locals. It also sets a base infection probability of 0.35 per exposure to that contaminated water. It even factors in a tiny non-water transmission rate of 0.002 per day. This is a brilliant detail because it respects Snow's own admission that a few cases might have actually spread through crowded, cramped dwellings rather than directly from the pump itself.
Section 3. The Parameters of Survival.
When you start digging into the simulation's parameters, you uncover these fascinating little micro-narratives where everyday human habits literally determined who lived and who died. We can anchor this story by comparing 2 local businesses that were situated right smack in the heart of the danger zone. On one side, you had 70 workers at the local Broad Street Brewery. And then, literally just steps away, you had 200 workers at a nearby wire cartridge factory.
This brilliantly illustrates the power of agent behavior in our model. The brewery workers, 0 deaths. Why? Because their employer gave them a daily ration of malt liquor, so they were drinking beer all day instead of the local pump water. But the factory workers, 18 tragic deaths. It turns out they kept 2 large tubs on site that were constantly refilled with water from the Broad Street pump. So, the key takeaway here is that by assigning specific behavioral traits to the agents in the simulation, it perfectly mirrors these incredible real-world survival rates.
Let's look at another really vital clue Snow found, which is also hard-coded right into our simulator. The Poland Street Workhouse. This facility housed a massive population of 535 inmates, and guys, it sat quite literally right in the dead center of the outbreak's epicenter.
Yet, out of those 535 inmates completely surrounded by sickness, there were only 5 workhouse deaths. The simulator handles this by making sure these specific agents are linked exclusively to their own private pump and the Grand Junction water supply. Because they never interacted with the Broad Street pump, they survived. It's just a perfect digital validation of Snow's spatial theory of waterborne transmission.
Which brings us to Section 4, Synthetic Data and Disclaimers.
Now, because this is an automatically generated early version simulator, we do need to throw in a quick, important caveat.
While the AI ingested the source material to create the code, users are strongly encouraged to verify all the outputs against Jon Snow's actual original paper. It's a really powerful tool for exploration, but, it still requires that human oversight. The documentation also includes a pretty firm synthetic data notice. Basically, the datasets and figures this simulator spits out are synthetically generated artifacts. They are computationally inspired by the historical source, and they do an expert job illustrating the phenomena, but they aren't the original, raw historical data itself. Think of it more as a heavily modeled reflection of history.
All right, Section 5, Running Alternative Historical Scenarios. This is where it gets really fun.
Since we validated these synthetic agents, we can now step into our digital detective shoes and really unleash the sheer power of counterfactuals. Here is our menu of alternate histories. The baseline gives us our standard 616 deaths, but look at all these variables we can tweak. We can remove the pump earlier. We can choose to never remove it at all. We could even increase how much the virtual population loves that specific water, or lower the disease's overall virulence. Let's walk through a few of the most impactful ones right now.
First, just a quick reminder of reality. In our historical baseline, Dr. Snow successfully lobbied the parish council to remove the Broad Street pump handle on September 8th. In the simulator's timeline, which kicks off on August 19th, September 8th marks exactly day 20. So, what actually happens in our early pump removal scenario? What if the authorities had listened just a bit faster and the handle was removed 5 days earlier, on day 15, which is September 3rd? Well, when the model runs this, we see an immediate, sharp reduction in the historical death rate. By digitally intervening just a few days sooner, the curve flattens drastically. It's incredible proof of just how unbelievably time-sensitive spatial epidemics truly are.
On the flip side, we can contrast a couple of deeply grim scenarios. If we select no pump removal, setting the removal day to 999, the epidemic simply ravages the population. It gets completely prolonged until the contamination just naturally decays on its own over time. And compare that to the high water preference scenario. You see, the Broad Street pump was actually really well known for its cold, clear-tasting water. If we tell the simulator that 90% of the district preferred it instead of the historical 73%, the exposure rate absolutely skyrockets, modeling a significantly higher death toll.
And finally, let's look at one last devastating what-if scenario, the workhouse scenario. Remember those 535 inmates who survived because of their private well? What if we digitally stripped them of that protective water supply and literally forced their virtual agents to use the Broad Street pump just like the rest of the neighborhood? The model outputs a massive, terrifying spike in the workhouse mortality rate. It is essentially the ultimate digital proof of Snow's initial real-world theory.
So we've seen how taking a static historical document and transforming it into a dynamic, agent-based AI simulation lets us understand the hidden mechanics of an epidemic from the inside out. But I want to leave you with a bit of a provocative thought today. If we can so accurately rewind and tweak the tape of the 1854 cholera outbreak to uncover the physics of history, what other historical events, mysteries, or disasters could we computationally explore next? The past, it turns out, might just be our most exciting new digital frontier. Thanks for diving into this explainer with me today.